Hello and welcome, a very warm welcome to the Green Bean. My name is Katie and this little cutie on my lap is Jack. We're both really glad that you're here. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode. This one is full of almost finished projects. I've got some painting, some knitting and some crochet, all of which are very close to the finish line and just need that tiny little push over the edge to get them done. Naturally, I haven't finished them. I've started some new things. So there's a new illustration project to share with you in this episode and a new knitting cast on as well. So settle in with a project of your own. I hope you enjoy spending some time with me and Jack and my creative projects and some time with us out on the mountain as well. Let's start with drawing and painting. And if you're new to the channel, by the way, I am an illustrator first and foremost. This was a question I was asked quite a lot at Unravel Festival last month, was what do I do? How do I describe my work? And I never really know because I do so many different things. And the thing I love about making my videos here on YouTube for this channel is it gives me an outlet for all of my different creative processes. I love to draw and paint. I love to knit and crochet. I love to sew. I love to spin. And there are other crafts that appear here from time to time as well. But in terms of training and work, I am an illustrator. And I've been working freelance as an illustrator for, gosh, it must be coming up to 15 years now. And, you know, that's what I'm spending most of my day doing. I run a shop where I sell illustrated goodies, although in recent years it's been very much inspired by my love of knitting and fibre crafts and the craft community, and I've been using my illustrations alongside my knitwear design, and I don't really know where I'm going with this ramble, but I just wanted to give a little introduction because it's a long time since I've shared anything, I think, about why I'm here and why what I'm talking about. I'm waffling. Anyway, let's get into some drawing. And in the last episode, I shared my progress or lack of progress on this painting, which was based on a scribble I found in a notebook by the side of my bed, which said, "Dapper frog in dungarees goes foraging for mushrooms." In the episode before last, I had started painting this version. In the last episode, I got annoyed and upset with this version and I started painting this version. And in this episode, I got annoyed and upset with this one and I've gone back to working on this original one. What can I say? This is a piece of personal work. I'm just doing it for fun and practice, and my purposes here with this channel are always about being honest about my creative process, sharing the ups and downs, the wrong turnings, the projects that get abandoned, the things that get picked up 4 years later and finished. I want to keep it real, so keeping it real, I've done 2 completely different versions of the same painting. I don't know that I'm happy with either of them, but right now I'm more happy with this one. And one thing that I realised is that it was slightly holding me back filming myself working on this painting, which surprised me because I film myself doing a lot of things these days. I've been making videos here on YouTube for 5 years now, and generally I feel more comfortable in front of the camera, but this was the first painting I had done after a month's break. I was maybe feeling a bit nervous or self-conscious, and particularly because I was having a struggle with it, I decided to see what would happen if I turned the camera off and just gave myself permission to paint without keeping a record of it. And it turned out it made it easier. So I am feeling much more happy with how this painting is going. It's not finished, but I'm plodding away on it. It's coming together, so hopefully I might have a finished painting to show you soon, I'm not sure. But in the meantime, I wanted to share a new project that I've started. And I am nervous about sharing this one because, like, common wisdom says that you shouldn't share things until you know that they're ready to come out in the world. And we've come across this dilemma in these videos before, I think, that I want to share and talk about things while I'm making them because that's when I'm really excited about them. But there's often a long lead time, either because I'm really slow and get sidetracked doing umpteen other projects, or because I'm working with production partners whose deadlines and lead times I can't control. And in this case, I'm waffling again, but in this case, I'm designing a new tea towel, and the people I work with to screen print and produce my tea towels here in the UK have a long lead time for production. So if I'm thinking I want to release a new tea towel for my shop this autumn, I really need to be designing it right now, and that's what I've been working on. When I launched my shop in its current form in 2019, one of the first products I brought out was this tea towel with all of the British sheep breeds on it. And that tea towel has remained by far my best-selling, most popular product in all of the time since then. It's one of my favourites. It's a piece of work I'm really proud of, and I felt like it was time to add another sheep-themed tea towel to my shop. And the idea behind this design is a collection of sheep working on yarn and fibre related crafts. So there's knitting represented, there's crochet represented, and there's spinning. And I think you can probably tell I've had a lot of fun coming up with the design for this one. So here's my rough sketch. You may or may not be able to quite interpret what's going on. I always sketch really loosely, and lately I've been sketching on my iPad rather than paper because it's easier, it's more accessible, and I'm less likely to lose the piece of paper. But it also means that I can show you these little playbacks of watching me work on the sketch, which is fun. And much like my original British Sheep Breeds tea towel, the medium I'm using for this new design is Scratchboard. And if you've been watching my videos for a long time, you have probably seen me work on Scratchboard before. But if you're quite new to the channel, you might not have come across Scratchboard because I haven't used it for a year or so. And I must say, I was missing it, and it's really nice to be back using it again. It's one of my favourite techniques. It's, as you can probably tell, super laborious, meticulous. It really appeals to my attention to detail and my love of processes that I can sink into and take a long time with. So Scratchboard is it's a medium that is basically a layer of china clay, which is white, lain over with Indian ink, which is black, and you use a metal stylus to scrape away the black and reveal the white. So it's sort of like drawing with black ink on white paper in reverse. You have to think about negative space and bringing out the areas of highlight rather than the areas of dark and shadow if you're working with black on white. And you can see that I'm moving my board around as I work here. That's because the blade has one sharp edge and it's quite directional. So in order to work the texture of these wools on these sheep, I'm moving the board around so I can work with the direction of my scraping blade rather than it tends to not be very happy if you scrape it in a direction that it doesn't like. So in order to fulfill these textures in the way that I want to, I need to move my board around as I'm working. So this is going to be a slow project. I'm probably going to be working on it for the next month or so. My vision is for this to be in colour. The sheep themselves are probably going to remain in black and white, as that covers most of the colours of sheep. And I've picked breeds that will show best in those two colours. But I wanted to add a pop of colour for the yarns and the knitwear, the striking graphic colourwork knitwear that all of these sheep are either wearing or working on. I think it will be really fun, and I have not by any means decided what those colours are going to be. I want to see the whole piece finished and put together before then, but this is going to be a project that's going to keep me going for the next couple of months. I'm just putting an hour or so on it here and there whenever I can, and steadily eventually I will have a new tea towel design. let's start with knitting, and the most obvious project, which is the one that I'm wearing. I shared this with you in the last episode. It's a version of my design called Beetle Magic, which was first published in 2020. Gosh, that's 3 years ago already. Time is weird, hey? Anyway, this sample garment had been sitting stuffed in a bag in a corner since before the launch of that pattern, because I couldn't finish it because the design has long sleeves. It's a jumper, and I ran into a dye lot issue and ran out of yarn for finishing this version. But with Unravel Festival on the horizon last month, I decided to pull this out of hibernation and just finish it with short sleeves. Turns out it was just the right garment to wear for a show. I wasn't too hot, and I've been really happy to turn this from a kind of sad, languishing project in a corner into something that's in my wardrobe, I can actually wear, and I'm really, really excited to have it. So I realised last time I didn't talk much about the yarn. So the yarn for this project is 2 different bases from RiverKnits here in the UK. The main colour is their Severn 4-ply, which is a 100% Jacob blend. And this green colour is called Murmur. The reason it's all beautifully heathered and delicious is it's actually a natural brown base. The brown I used for my other sample jumper, in fact, as an undyed colour, but this teal colour is dyed over the top of the brown, so it gives it this lovely, deep, rich colour, and I love it. And the contrasting colour, while it looks like lots of different coloured yarns, is actually a single yarn called Chimera. Pretty unique yarn to RiverKnits. It's kind of multicoloured, colour changing yarn, so you don't have to think about managing lots of different colours. The yarn kind of does all the hard work for you of making your beetles multicoloured and iridescent looking. And it was actually seeing these 2 colours together at the RiverKnits open day that inspired this jumper and this design. So it's really nice to have a version for myself that's in the actual colours that inspired the design in the first place. In terms of other knitting, if you follow me on Instagram, you may have already seen I have a very nearly finished project to share with you. This is what I've been calling my Mithril jumper. Mithril named after the yarn, which is named after the dwarven precious metal in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The actual design is called Nightingale by Norah Gaughan. It was originally published in Pom Pom Quarterly magazine, issue 27. And yeah, I have very nearly finished it. What's left to do is 1 sleeve seam and pick up and knit the neckband. I'm so close, and I don't know about you, but when my projects come within sight of the finish line, that's when I'm most likely to set them aside, get distracted, do something else. You'll see later in the episodes that I've already cast on a new project before completely finishing this one. And it's something in particular about seamed garments. Let me spend a moment talking about how much I love seaming knitted garments. So it's not that I procrastinate the act of seaming. I actually enjoy the process, and I generally prefer seamed or pieced knitted garments than seamless ones because I find the seams lend a bit of structure and it's easier to get a really nice fit. Plus, I love knitting my garments in smaller pieces, so if I'm travelling or something, I can take a sleeve or a front of a jumper. When I'm knitting a seamless piece like a yoke, for example, and you get to the sleeves, you're kind of wrangling this whole garment's worth of fabric on your lap while you're working, and I find that quite frustrating compared to working in pieces. But I do like to take my time when it comes to the seaming. I like to do a really nice job. I like to not rush it. And so I've been sewing up basically half a seam a day for the last week. So close to finishing this jumper, but I've been taking it really, really slowly, almost savouring the process, and I'm getting pretty close to finishing it. So when I seam, I use mattress stitch, generally in the same yarn that I've knitted the garment with, so that my stitches will be completely invisible. Although when I was first taught to do mattress stitch, I was taught to do it in a contrasting colour, and it was incredible how much the colour of the yarn that you stitch with actually doesn't show in the finished garment. So if I've ever knitted, for example, with a woolen spun yarn where it's a bit more fragile, I might seam the garment in a sock yarn that's a bit stronger, and I don't stress too much about not having an exact colour match, because actually the stitches become almost completely invisible when the garment's finished. And when I'm mattress stitching, I tend to use a few of these locking stitch markers just to hold my pieces of fabric in place. It's similar to the way you would use pins when you're sewing. I've tried using pins in knitted fabric, but they're a little bit small and I'm clumsy and forgetful, so they tend to fall out. I drop them on the floor and the next thing I know I've trodden on them. So these locking stitch markers are a good alternative to that problem for holding my pieces in place while I stitch on them. And I tend to work from the most visible areas to the least visible areas. So for example, with the sleeve cap, I'm starting to stitch at the top of the shoulder and stitching down towards the underarm. So that means I will stitch in 2 lines around the armhole, but starting them both at the top, working round to the underarm. And that means if I've got ever such a slight mismatch of the way my sleeve is fitting into my armhole, if I need to do any fudging to make it fit, that's happening under the arm where it won't be seen, rather than at the top of the shoulder where it might be much more visible. And the same with the sleeves. When I'm working the mattress stitch up the sleeve, I start at the cuff and work up towards the underarm, so if there is any mismatch of the stitches, that's hidden away under the arm rather than visible at a wonky cuff. And now the last thing that remains to be done to finish this garment is to pick up and knit the neckline. Now it doesn't have ribbing around the neck, it has a really adorable folded edge with a picot, so it makes a kind of zigzag border, and I love that as a kind of delicate finish for this garment. I think it's perfect. So that's all I have left to do, and I will have a finished jumper to wear. Let's talk modifications, because I made two significant ones, one which was planned in advance and one which I decided as I was sewing this garment together. So first of all, these sleeves I drafted myself. The original design has a puff sleeve which I like but thought wasn't for me and not very practical for everyday life. So I drafted a plain sleeve cap, which I'm really happy with and so happy with how it fits. And secondly, this split hem, which is not part of the design, but when I tried on my garment for the first time, it was a little bit longer than I intended, and rather than have that ribbing really stretching across my middle where I feel a little self-conscious sometimes, I decided just not to seam the ribbing at the bottom. So I've got these two loose hems and it feels like I've got a little bit more space, and actually I'm really pleased with how that looks. One final modification I made was a very last minute one. My sleeves also turned out too long. This is a lesson in gauge. I think I got more relaxed as I worked on this project. My gauge got a little looser, so both my body and my sleeves ended up a little bit longer than intended. So I decided to just do this folded cuff. So I turned the cuff inwards and I've stitched it down, matching the ribbing to where the ribbing started. So I've got this lovely double thickness cuff. And overall, I am completely in love with this project. The yarn, I don't think I mentioned before, is from New Zealand. The reason that I got inspired to buy it and to make this project is because the yarn is from the very sheep, the very flock that was used to weave the elven cloaks in the Lord of the Rings movies. And this design by Norah has always been evocative of the elven architecture in those movies for me. So it was the perfect combination of yarn and project, and I was so fortunate to get the right gauge. It's been a delight of a project, even if it has been a slow one. I've been kind of savouring it and I'm absolutely thrilled with the finished result. And I have another almost finished project to share with you that I've been stalling on because it's at about 95%. You may remember from the last episode this cowl that I was knitting as a gift for my friend. Did I say knitting? I meant crocheting. This cowl I was crocheting as a gift for my friend. The pattern is called the Leah Cow by Knotsosquare Crochet and was requested by my friend. And I've tried to match the colours to the sample as much as I could, but with a little hint towards the trans flag. And I'm really pleased with how this has turned out. I'm just going to pop it on and show you. So there's a lot of fabric. I wasn't expecting it to be this long. Try to ignore all these ends that I have to weave in. I'm ignoring them for now. It has this little bit of ribbing at the top. I've never done crocheted ribbing before. It was slightly stressful. The pattern is marked as suitable for beginners, so I was prepared for it to be more straightforward than it was. It was fine, but you need a little bit of crochet know-how to be able to follow the instructions. There was also this lovely edging, which is called crab stitch, another crochet technique I've never done before. That was a little bit tricky to learn, but now that I've done it, it's a really nice edging, and I'll use it on other projects because I'm really pleased with how it looks. So the yarn I'm used for this is Socks Yeah DK by CoopKnits, and I've been really happy with how it's crocheted up. All that remains to be done for this project is a good block, because as you can see that top edge is curling over a little bit, so I want to give it a good block out, and then there will be a little picot border along this bottom edge after I've woven all of those ends in. But before we get on to that task, I needed a palette cleanser, and so I cast on something new, as you do. Now, Wonderwool Wales is coming up next month, always one of my favourite shows to go to, and actually now my local show. I'm really excited that I will be able to vend at a trade show, but also come home to my own house and my partner and Jack in the evenings. It will be a really different experience, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I realised that I had not knitted with the yarn I purchased at Wonderwool last year, and well, you can't buy more yarn at a trade show if you haven't knitted with the yarn you bought from last year, so it seemed like a good choice for what to cast on for my next project. I was also craving a shawl. I haven't knitted a shawl since I made the Sometime Alone shawl by Graf McFadden in apparently 2018, so that's 5 years ago since I knitted anything that was lace or a shawl for myself. I've crocheted a couple of pieces since then, but nothing knitted, and it was the kind of project I was craving. The thing I love about working on shawls is you don't really have to worry about gauge. I love making garments, I love wearing knitted garments, but sometimes working on the fit can be a little bit stressful. A shawl is just a massive piece of fabric, and so long as you're creating a gauge that gives you a fabric that you like, then you don't have to stress about it too much. And I had these two yarns that I purchased at Wonderwool last year that I didn't have a project in mind for as such, but they just seemed to be friends. So the first is this, I'm looking for words to describe it. I don't really know what colour it is. It's sort of khaki, brown, green, gold. Depending on what light you look at it in, it looks different. But it is a wonderful hand-dyed colour by Zakami yarns, who I hadn't met before, but they were stand neighbours of mine at Wonderwool last year, and it was so lovely to meet Gaughan and chat to him. And I spent all weekend staring at two skeins of this colour on his stand, and eventually decided they had to come home with me. The colour is called Juno, and the base is Blueface Leicester and Masham I've heard people pronounce it both ways and I'm not sure which is correct. My instinct says Masham, so I'm going to go with Blueface Leicester and Masham. And as it happened, my friend Sinead of Gullrock Fibres also had a yarn of the same blend on her stand, this beautiful tonal green colour. Now, Sinead uses all natural dyes, and just this colour is incredible. I know that greens are really difficult to come by with natural dyes, so this is something really special. There was just one skein of it. The colour is called Wood Elf, and well, I needed to adopt it, and I loved how these two work together, particularly because the one from Zakami has some little subtle speckles and tones of green in there. So I decided I wanted the two to work together in a shawl project, and I was scouting about for a 2-colour shawl that might work for the quantity I have. And I came across the Madara shawl by Inese or Inese Sang, which was published in Amarisu magazine, I think last year's spring and summer issue. And I loved this shawl when I first saw it. It's a gorgeous design with loads of different techniques and textures in there. There's eyelets, there's lace, there's Latvian braid, there's all kinds of magic going on. I think it'll be a really engaging and fun piece to knit, and well, I've only got a tiny triangle to show for myself so far, but already one of the things I love about shawls is, well, you start with a tiny cast on. I think this was cast on 7 stitches, so it's very easy to get going. And there's always something interesting going on. You're increasing, you're doing a bit of lace, you're changing colour. I'm finding it a really enjoyable project so far. However, I did come across one unexpected snag, which was when I was winding these yarns. I noticed that there was a discrepancy in the thickness, and I hadn't realised when I'd bought them that the yarn from Zakami is a 4-ply, which is what's specified for this shawl pattern, and the yarn from Gullrock Fibres is in fact a DK. And I do have enough meterage of it according to the pattern to use it for this project. And I think actually, because the green is just going to be used as that pop of colour and contrast, maybe the fact that it's a heavier weight yarn and it lends a bit more texture will make it more interesting as well. I sort of feel like, you know, it's a shawl. I can break the rules a little bit, and nothing too terrible will happen. I am slightly worried I might run out, even though officially I've got enough. I am going to be cutting it fine, and obviously being naturally dyed, it's completely unrepeatable. But I'll just go with it, see how far I get, and if I do run out, I'll make an adaptation to the pattern. So far, I really like how the thicker yarn is adding a bit of texture as well as colour contrast in the beginning of this shawl. So we'll see how it goes. I was slightly gutted when I first realised there was a difference, but actually I think it's probably going to be fine. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of The Green Bean, and thank you to our patrons. I could not make these videos on any kind of a regular schedule without financial input, and everyone who supports on Patreon is part of making these videos possible. So huge thanks to you, and if you'd like to join us over there, there are lots of benefits to becoming a patron, including accessing all the episodes early and without adverts, and there are also extra episodes available as well as discounts in my shop. Oh, we okay? If Patreon isn't your thing, there are plenty of other ways you can support my work as well. Obviously, shopping in my shop is one of them. I also have a Ko-fi account where you can buy me a cuppa, or more realistically, buy Jack a biscuit. And if financial support doesn't work for you, then please spread the word, tell people you've enjoyed my videos, leave a comment down below. I love hearing from you, and yeah, just letting people know that you've enjoyed my show is incredibly helpful. Thanks also to Will McNichol, whose beautiful guitar music accompanies all my episodes. I'm so grateful that Will gives me permission to use his music in my videos, and I know so many of you enjoy listening to it while watching me and Jack out on our walks. That's all, buddy. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye.